What if I told you that the planet you live in, the cities you walk through, the borders you recognize, even the laws that govern you, were all shaped thousands of years ago as something as simple as flowing water? It sounds dramatic, but rivers didn't just water crops or feed animals. They built civilization. They connected people, fueled empires, and literally drew the map of the modern planet. Today, we're diving into the story of how rivers became humanity's first highways, carrying trade, power, and conquest, and how the influence still runs through our lives today. Before highways, before trains, before anything resembling modern infrastructure, there were waterways. They were the original trade routes, cutting through wild terrain long before humans learned to pave paths or build bridges. Follow the river, and you would almost always find people. Take the Nile. It wasn't just Egypt's water source, it was its entire identity. Its annual floods gave birth to farming calendars, religious rituals, and taxation systems. Every year, like clockwork, it turned barren sand into fertile farmland. The Nile didn't just feed Egypt, it defined it. The Nile also helped name the Nilometer, which refers to the ancient measuring structures that Egyptians used to predict floods. Those readings determined food supplies, taxes, and even political stability. In a sense, a stone pillar in the middle of a riverbed was the planet's first economic forecast. Then there's Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Historians call it the cradle of civilization for a reason. Those rivers made it possible to grow crops, transport goods, and connect city-states in ways the ancient planet had never seen. Rivers gave rise to not just agriculture, but to connection. And connection is where civilization begins. Basically, if you lived near water, you thrived. If you didn't, you either moved closer to it or got left behind. Rivers were like the Wi-Fi network of the ancient planet. Everyone wanted access, but not everyone had a strong enough signal. Fun fact, even language reflects this influence. The term rival actually comes from the Latin rivis, meaning river. Two people who shared a river became rivals, fighting for the same stream. Water literally shaped how we think about competition. As societies grew, rivers became superhighways for trade. On the Indus River, merchants shipped cotton and jewelry to faraway Mesopotamia. In China, the Yangtze and the Yellow Rivers connected inland farmers to bustling coastal markets. Boats replaced carts, and riverbanks became cities. And one trade network you've definitely heard of, the Silk Road, wasn't just about deserts and caravans. Behind the camels and mountain passes, there was a whole system of river connections that made it all possible. The Thordaria and the Amudaria, and countless other smaller waterways that linked the empire across Asia. Even in medieval Europe, this was still true. The Rhine, Seine, and Danube became the arteries of kingdoms. Control a river, and you didn't control trade, you controlled power. That's why so many European capitals sit on rivers. Paris on the Seine, London on the Thames, and Rome on the Tiber. History didn't pick those spots, geography did. The very concept of port cities like Venice or Amsterdam birthed the first global banks. Merchants needed places to store wealth and fund voyages, and it all started with people moving goods on rivers. You could say the financial world literally flowed downstream. But rivers don't just move goods, they move armies, and the Romans do this better than anyone. Their empire expanded along the Rhine and the Danube, which acted as both road and border. They could ship supplies, move legions, and defend against invasions, all thanks to those waterways. After Rome fell, those same rivers became boundaries between kingdoms. In many ways, the political map of Europe still follows the same ancient curves of those rivers. Further east, in China, the Grand Canal, a man-made river system stretching over 1,000 miles, unified an entire empire by moving grain and troops between the north and the south. It was a 7th century version of an interstate highway system, centuries ahead of its time. And rivers could just as easily destroy enemies. When Napoleon's armies tried to cross the Berezina River, disaster followed. When Hitler's forces hit the Volga in Stalingrad, the current of the war turned against them. Time and time again, rivers became turning points of history. They don't care who's in charge, they've outlasted every conqueror. And in a way, rivers were history's great equalizers. A peasant farmer and an emperor both depended on the same river water. You could control armies, but you could not command the tides. Even today, rivers are still tools of power, just with different weapons. Take the Nile Basin, shared by more than 10 countries. Upstream, Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam gives it immense control over the water flow, something Egypt calls an existential threat. Or look at South Asia, where India and Pakistan rely on the same river system, the Indus. Their water sharing treaty has been held for decades, but tensions rise every time one side builds a new dam. Some scientists argue that future wars might not be fought over oil, but over fresh water, because as populations grow and climates shift, rivers could become the most valuable resource of all. Our ancestors fought for river banks with swords and chariots. Now we fight with diplomacy, policy, and infrastructure. Same rivers, same stakes, just new methods. Today, we don't think much about rivers. We have planes, highways, satellites, and data cables. But the truth is, we still live by the same ancient rules. Around 90% of the planet's population lives within 10 kilometers of a freshwater source. We still build our cities, firms, and industries around them. The rivers that fed our ancestors now power our grids and cool our factories. But climate change is shifting the flow. Some rivers are drying up, others are flooding harder than ever. The same forces that built civilization are now testing its limits. And there's a poetic irony in that. The very rivers that created abundance can now force us to rethink how to live again. It's history coming full circle, because rivers didn't just shape landscapes, they shaped destiny. So next time you cross a bridge or see a river winding across a map, remember this. Every current you see once carried traders, warriors, farmers, and dreamers. The rivers wrote the first chapters of human history, and whether we realize it or not, they're still writing the next ones. If you enjoyed this dive into the hidden forces that shape our planet, make sure to like and subscribe. And make sure to tell me in the comments about any other topics you may want me to cover in the future. Anyways, I'll catch y'all later.